On a freezing winter night, a lonely millionaire thought he had lost every reason to believe in miracles. His mansion stood silent, haunted only by memories of his wife and daughter. But then in the snow outside his home, he saw a fragile little girl kneeling, her small hands clutching a broken Christmas angel. She whispered a question that shattered the silence. "Do you think angels can bring me a dad?" In that moment, two broken lives collided, one filled with loss, the other with desperate hope. What followed was not just a meeting of strangers, but the beginning of a story that would prove family is not about blood, but about who chooses to stay. If you believe in the healing power of love and second chances, subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories and stay with us. The miracle you've been waiting for might be in the next story. The night was colder than memory itself, the kind of biting air that made every breath sting and every silence stretch endlessly. In the vast city of Minneapolis, winter draped everything in a white stillness, muffling sound, suffocating warmth. Inside the towering glass walls of Ethan Carter's mansion, there was no trace of laughter, no hint of life. The marble floors reflected only the shadows of a man who had once thought ambition was enough to fill the hollow places of his heart. Years ago, this house had been filled with the echo of his wife Emma's laughter and his daughter Claire's playful footsteps. Now, it was an echo chamber of absence. Ethan returned from another long day at work, his leather shoes tapping across the frozen floor. Each step reverberated up the grand staircase, like a ghost mocking him with reminders of all that was gone. He set down his briefcase, stared at the walls, and listened to the groan of the settling house. He had built everything he thought a man should want: wealth, recognition, the admiration of peers, but none of it spoke back to him when the night stretched too long. In the dim light of the living room, he noticed the familiar outlines of dust-covered frames. Emma smiling in the garden, Claire spinning in mid-twirl, her hair flying like sunlight. The music box sat silent on the piano, the lullaby they had once played endlessly frozen in its gears. Draped over the bench was Emma's scarf, still carrying the faint sharpness of gardenia perfume. He had tried to wash it out, to erase what remained, but memory is not so easily scrubbed away. Dinner was nothing more than reheated leftovers eaten standing in the kitchen. He remembered Claire once teasing him, saying food was lonely when eaten alone. Now everything in the house seemed lonely, even the air itself. He walked from room to room, not bothering with the lights, preferring the shadows because they mirrored what lived inside him. When he finally stepped out into the driveway later that night, telling himself it was only to check the mail, the world was silent under the heavy sky. Snow lay like a shroud across the ground. He slid into the car, turned the ignition, and for a brief moment just sat there, eyes closed, letting the hum of the heater fill the emptiness. But when he began to back out, something darted across the headlights. A small, frantic movement, too fragile for the winter. He slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching against the frozen stone. Heart pounding, hands trembling, he squinted into the cone of light. There, kneeling in the snow, was a little girl. She couldn't have been more than 7 or 8. A thin pink jacket clung to her shoulders, her dress far too light for the freezing night. She was scrubbing the ice with a rag, her hands raw and red, as if the desperate act might change the world. Ethan stumbled from the car, his breath clouding the night. He called out, his voice cracking from panic and something deeper, but the girl froze, wide-eyed, then bolted into the shadows before he could reach her. Silence swallowed her. What she left behind was a small ornament in the snow. Ethan bent, his knees burning against the ice, and picked it up. A glass angel, cheap and cracked, one wing broken but carefully glued back together by small hands. Around its middle was a scrap of paper. He peeled it open, and the words in blue marker pierced him like a blade. "Do you think angels can bring me a dad?" The world seemed to collapse inward in that moment. His chest tightened, his eyes burned, his throat refused to swallow. That one question, so simple, so impossible, shattered the walls he had built around his grief. He thought of Claire, once small enough to sit on his lap, asking why people prayed to angels at Christmas. He thought of Emma, who always reached for him when silence became too heavy. And now, here was a child he did not know, asking the one question he feared he could never answer for anyone again. He carried the ornament back into the house, his fingers numb, his steps unsteady. He set it on the piano where Emma's scarf still lay. That night he did not sleep. He sat in the half-light, staring at the angel with its cracked wing, tracing the fracture with his thumb. The question echoed over and over, refusing to leave him. What if she came back? What if she never did? By dawn, his mansion felt colder than the snow outside. He opened the front door, staring at the porch, seeing only a small footprint already fading into whiteness. The angel remained, fragile and waiting. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt something other than numbness. A seed of purpose took root, terrifying and unfamiliar. He pressed the ornament to his chest, whispering a prayer he had forgotten how to say. The following days blurred into routine, but nothing was the same. He attended meetings, sat through conference calls, nodded at presentations about profits and acquisitions, but every time he blinked, he saw her small figure in the snow. His pen scratched useless outlines of angel wings across the margins of his notes, until one word appeared without him realizing: Dad. He closed the notebook quickly, the ache in his chest too sharp to bear. Each evening, the silence of his mansion pushed him toward the security footage. Grainy images replayed the moment over and over, the headlights catching her frantic movements, the look in her eyes before she vanished. He asked his security chief to run her image through police systems to check missing child reports. He began calling shelters, his voice trembling as he repeated her description. Thin, young, brown hair, carrying an angel ornament. Always the same answer: no one had seen her. But something inside him refused to let go. Nights found him packing the driveway, scanning the snow for a footprint, a glove, anything that meant she had returned. Other nights he sat at the piano, pressing keys that gave him no melody, only hollow notes. And then, for the first time in years, he prayed. Not for himself, not for his own loss, but for a little girl whose name he did not yet know, who had left behind a question powerful enough to awaken the broken man he had become. The days that followed felt like a strange half-life for Ethan. He moved through his business as if on autopilot, attending board meetings, shaking hands, giving answers he did not hear himself speak. The world wanted numbers, forecasts, contracts, but in every corner of his mind lingered the sight of a small girl kneeling in the snow, her hands raw and red, her whispered question pressing into him like a wound that would not close. Late at night, he returned to the recordings from his security cameras, replaying the grainy footage until the lines blurred. Again and again, he watched her hunched figure, the frantic movement of her arms, the shadow of terror in her eyes as she ran. He froze the image, studied her face, searched for details that could give him more than this fragment. He called the police, shelters, even hospitals, repeating the same description until his voice cracked. Some politely promised to notify him if anyone reported a child like her. Most said nothing could be done without more information. But he could not stop. The mansion grew restless around him, its walls groaning with the cold, while he paced from room to room with the ornament in his hand. Sometimes he pressed it to his chest as if the broken glass could guide him to her. Sometimes he whispered questions to the silence as though Emma or Claire might still answer him. Yet all he heard was the echo of his own grief, until finally, one restless night, he prayed again. His words were clumsy, foreign after so long, but they came from a place deeper than pride. He asked for the child's safety, for a chance to see her once more, for something to pierce the endless winter that had taken over his life. Across town, the girl he sought, Lily, sat on a thin mattress in a cramped apartment that smelled of cigarettes and sour coffee. Her foster aunt, Sharon Evans, barked orders from the kitchen, her voice sharp with bitterness. Bills slammed onto the counter. A cupboard door cracked shut with a sound like punishment. "No one wants you, Lily," she spat more than once, the words lashing across the air like a whip. Lily did not answer. She had learned silence was safer. She clutched her notebook under her pillow, the pages filled with sketches of angels. Each drawing carried the same wish: wings wide, halos crooked, but always standing beside a smaller figure of a girl. That night Sharon tore one of the drawings from her hands, sneering that stupid angels never listened. Lily did not cry. She pressed her forehead to the frosted window, whispering into the glass for anyone to hear. In her heart she still held the memory of the man in the big house, the one who had almost spoken to her before she ran. A fragile hope flickered. Maybe he had seen her, maybe he would remember. But then she buried the thought, afraid of disappointment. Meanwhile, Ethan kept searching. One evening, after a long day that felt emptier than usual, he skipped a gala dinner and instead called shelter after shelter. His voice shook with urgency. "I am looking for a little girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, thin, brown hair. She might carry a small angel ornament." The line often went quiet, the volunteers apologetic. Each no was a weight added to his chest, yet he pressed on. And then one night at a benefit event he reluctantly attended, something shifted. The social worker on stage read a list of children recently brought into the system. Her voice faltered when she spoke of a girl found locked in a shed, surrounded by angel drawings. The words struck Ethan like lightning. His fork clattered against the plate, his body moving before his mind could catch up. He found the woman, Jenna Morgan, near the exit and asked if the child was safe. He pulled the ornament from his pocket, the glass catching the light. Jenna's eyes narrowed with recognition. The girl was Lily Evans, she told him. She had been taken to the county hospital, but access was restricted. Only family could visit. Ethan's heart sank, his voice raw as he admitted he was no relation, only a man who could not stop thinking about her. Jenna studied him with weary suspicion. She had seen too many people offer fleeting kindness that vanished when the cost grew heavy. But Ethan's trembling hands, his voice cracking as he said the words, "She left this for me," pierced through her defenses. Finally, she relented. "5 minutes," she said. The hospital smelled of bleach and fatigue, its corridors painted with faded murals meant to comfort children but too chipped to fool anyone. Ethan followed Jenna down the hallway, his heart drumming louder than his footsteps. When he entered the small room, he almost faltered. Lily lay curled beneath blankets, her hair tangled, her hands bandaged. She looked smaller than he remembered, fragile as glass. He crouched beside her, holding out the ornament. "I brought you something," he whispered. She blinked, her gaze falling to the angel. Slowly, with hesitation that cut him deeper than any wound, she reached out. Her fingers closed around it, her breath trembling. Then, in a voice faint as falling snow, she asked, "Are you an angel or just someone who got lost?" The words tore through him. He bowed his head, fighting the ache in his chest. "I am not an angel," he admitted softly, "but I wish I were." He left the ornament in her palm, his hand lingering just long enough to feel her warmth before retreating. Outside the room, Jenna warned him, "Caring is not the same as staying. Do not make promises you cannot keep." Ethan nodded, though inside he knew something had already changed. Days later, Lily's aunt appeared at the hospital, her voice sharp and practiced as she demanded custody. She painted Lily as troublesome, manipulative, a child in need of stricter discipline. But Ethan saw through the act, the calculation in Sharon's eyes, the impatience in the way she tapped her purse strap. He contacted his attorney, quietly gathering evidence, determined not to let Lily slip back into darkness. Work obligations tugged at him. His company's largest product launch loomed, interviews awaited, investors called. But when the moment came, he chose differently. He canceled appearances, skipped meetings, ignored the furious messages from his team. Instead, he sat in that cold hospital room, reading Lily stories, answering doctors' questions, simply being present. For the first time in years, his life's urgency shifted. When the emergency foster hearing finally convened, Lily clutched the angel in her pocket. She did not speak much, her voice almost too small to reach the judge's bench. But Ethan had written her a note, one simple promise: "I will be here tomorrow too." The words carried weight beyond law or blood. The court ruled Lily would be placed with a foster family, away from Sharon. It was not the final step, but it was a beginning. That night, as Ethan returned to his empty house, he found one of Lily's drawings slipped between his papers, a sketch of 2 angels, one tall, one small, their wings touching. He pinned it above his desk. The mansion felt less like a mausoleum, more like a place waiting to be filled. And for the first time in years, the silence of the house no longer felt like punishment. It felt like possibility. Spring crept slowly into Minneapolis, but inside Ethan Carter's mansion the change was already underway. What had once been a house of silence was filling, little by little, with signs of life. The rooms no longer echoed only with emptiness. They carried new sounds, the thud of small shoes across the hall, the murmur of laughter that caught him off guard, the hesitant hum of music that seemed to return as though it had never truly left. Lily was cautious at first. She still clutched her notebook everywhere she went, pages filled with sketches of angels whose wings always seemed just a little broken. She lingered at the edges of gatherings, uncertain if she belonged. But Ethan learned patience in a way he never had before. He noticed how she watched him when she thought he was not looking, testing whether his presence was a fleeting kindness or something steadier. He responded not with grand gestures but with small constancies. Cocoa with too many marshmallows, a blanket tucked carefully at night, his voice steady as he reminded her she was safe. The house itself seemed to breathe again. Drawings appeared on the refrigerator, paper angels dangled from chandeliers, and the mudroom filled with mismatched gloves and muddy boots. Ethan, who had once cared so much about order and perfection, found himself laughing when flour spilled across the counter or when sticky fingerprints smudged the glass doors. He had once thought success was measured in flawless deals and polished marble floors. Now success was hearing Lily call out to him from the other room, her voice steady with trust. On weekends, she stayed with him under a trial foster arrangement. Each Friday he picked her up from the shelter, and each Sunday evening he returned her. Those 2 days became the most anticipated moments of his week. They played chess on rainy afternoons, baked cookies that never came out the same twice, and filled evenings with books and whispered questions. Lily's laughter was cautious, but each time it grew stronger, Ethan felt a piece of himself knit back together. One night, as snow fell in fat, lazy flakes, she sat cross-legged on the rug, sketching in her notebook. After a long silence, she asked, almost too quietly to hear, "If I trust you to stay, does that mean I am not alone anymore?" Ethan set down his coffee and looked at her with a gravity that surprised even him. "It means neither of us has to be alone again," he said. The words were not polished, not planned, but they carried the truth of his heart. Yet life does not move forward without shadows. News arrived that a distant uncle, Robert Ellis, had filed for custody. He had wealth, connections, and a claim to Lily's inheritance. His record appeared spotless. On paper, he looked stable and responsible. But Ethan knew the truth. Robert had never cared for Lily, had never even shown up until money was involved. The thought of losing her to someone who saw her as an asset rather than a child filled Ethan with a fear sharper than grief. The courthouse became their battlefield. Ethan sat on hard benches, the ornament clutched in his palm, while lawyers argued about bloodlines and stability. Robert's attorney painted Ethan as impulsive, emotionally unstable, a bachelor unsuitable for parenthood. Ethan felt the heat rise in his face, but he kept his gaze steady on Lily, who sat with her hands trembling in her lap. When the judge asked what family meant, Lily lifted her chin and answered in a voice that shook but did not falter. "Family is someone who stays even when it is hard," she said. She glanced at Ethan, and the entire room seemed to hold its breath. The uncle's lawyer pressed her, insisting that she had known Ethan only a short time, but Lily's reply was simple. "He is my real family." She clutched the ornament in her pocket, her small fingers wrapped around its broken wing. Her words cut through the legal arguments like light through winter clouds. Jenna Morgan testified, speaking of Lily's progress under Ethan's care. Mrs. Brooks described the transformation of his home, once a tomb, now alive with warmth. Ethan himself barely spoke, his throat tight, his heart hammering. When the recess was called, Lily turned to him with tears spilling over. "Do you think angels can bring me a dad if I am not good enough?" she whispered. Ethan knelt, pressing his forehead to hers. "You do not have to be perfect, Lily. You just have to let someone love you." "I will never stop." When the judge returned, her voice was steady, her eyes softened. She granted Ethan temporary guardianship. It was not the final victory, but it was enough to let hope take root. Robert's fury was palpable, but Ethan hardly noticed. All that mattered was Lily's hand clutching his as though she would never let go. The weeks that followed were filled with both ordinary days and extraordinary change. Ethan let Lily choose the paint color for her new bedroom. She picked sunshine yellow, and he painted it himself, uneven but full of care. She taped drawings to the walls, sketched angels above the bed, and whispered good night without asking if he would still be there in the morning. Her trust grew piece by piece, like fragile glass reforged by fire. Ethan, too, transformed. His office once displayed only reminders of loss, but now it carried Lily's artwork, a mug scrawled with "World's Best Dad," chess pieces scattered across the desk. Meetings he once considered essential faded in importance. He still worked, but he no longer lived for the empty applause of achievement. His life was measured in pancake breakfasts, board games, and quiet evenings reading by the fire. There were still shadows. Lily woke from nightmares, trembling with the memory of her mother's absence. On those nights, Ethan sat by her bed, holding her hand until her breathing steadied. Together they lit candles on anniversaries, honoring the family they had lost while building the one they were becoming. And in those moments, Ethan realized grief did not vanish. It wove itself into hope, creating something stronger, something lasting. When spring arrived, the house blossomed with laughter. Friends from the shelter visited. Mrs. Brooks brought her famous apple pie. Jenna read stories aloud, her voice carrying warmth through the halls. One evening, Lily decorated paper angels with ribbons and handed them out to her friends, her cheeks pink with joy. Ethan watched from the doorway, his chest full with a feeling he had thought was gone forever. One night, as the sun sank gold behind the city, Lily leaned against him on the porch steps. "Promise you will always stay," she whispered. He kissed her forehead, his voice steady. "Always, Lily, no matter what." For the first time, neither of them had reason to doubt. There are moments in life when the smallest question can open the deepest wounds, and yet also light the path toward healing. For Ethan Carter, that question came from the trembling voice of a little girl in the snow. "Do you think angels can bring me a dad?" It was a plea whispered into the night, fragile as glass, but powerful enough to shatter the silence that had ruled his life for years. In that instant, his world of wealth, ambition, and loneliness cracked open, and through the fracture came the possibility of something greater than success: love. Lily had been discarded by those who should have protected her, told again and again that she was unwanted, unworthy, too much trouble. Yet she still drew angels, still whispered prayers, still carried a broken ornament with the faith that somewhere, someone would choose to stay. And Ethan, burdened by grief, drowning in echoes of his lost family, discovered that he was the one who could answer her prayer. Not with wings or miracles, but with something far rarer in this world: the decision to stay, day after day, even when it was hard. Their journey was not easy. There were courtrooms filled with cold arguments about bloodlines and money, nights haunted by nightmares and doubts that clawed at both their hearts. But through it all, a bond grew. Ethan learned to trade silence for laughter, order for messy drawings taped across the walls, grief for the steady warmth of being needed again. Lily learned that family was not about perfection or promises easily broken. It was about someone showing up, again and again, until trust blossomed where fear once lived. The mansion that had once been a mausoleum became a home, a place where the kitchen smelled of pancakes on Sunday mornings, where chess pieces scattered across the living room floor, where the words "Good night, Dad" became the sweetest melody. The angel ornament, cracked and imperfect, remained at the center of it all, a reminder that love is not flawless, but it is enough to mend what has been broken. This story is not only about Ethan and Lily. It is about all of us, about the way love can rise from ashes, how second chances can find us when we least expect them, how choosing to stay can become the greatest miracle of all. We live in a world full of noise, where loneliness hides behind closed doors, where children pray for parents and adults bury themselves in success to mask their grief. But stories like this remind us that hope is never truly gone. It waits, fragile but persistent, for someone brave enough to reach for it. If this story touched your heart, remember, it is not the only one. There are countless tales of resilience, of kindness, of broken wings finding a way to fly again. Here at Hidden Echo Stories, we believe in telling them, in reminding the world that love still exists, that second chances are real, that angels might not always have wings but sometimes arrive as people who simply refuse to walk away. So if you believe in the healing power of love, if you believe that even the smallest promise can light the darkest night, then join us. Subscribe to Hidden Echo Stories, and let us keep walking together through the quiet places where hope is waiting to be found.